Okay, good morning, everyone. We need to start with appointing a chair for the meeting. So could I ask for nominations for chair, please?
Could I nominate Councillor Richard Boyles?
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that?
Yes, can I second that, please?
Thank you. Are there any other nominations? Nope. Okay, Richard, I'll hand over to you.
Yep, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. First of all, for the benefit of those who are here at the meeting, can I just get people to run through who they are? I'm County Councillor Rich Boyles and I'm the Deputy Leader at GPC. Kathy, do you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you. Councillor Kathy Williams, I'm the Cabinet Member for Long-Term Care at County Council.
Tim?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Councillor Tim Harman, Cabinet Member for Public Health and Communities.
And Patrick?
Yeah, morning, everybody. Councillor Patrick Molyneux, and I'm Cabinet Member for Economy, Education and Skills.
Paul?
Councillor Paul Hodgkinson, Leader of the Lib Dems on the County Council.
Thank you. Mandy?
Mandy Quayle, Director of People and Digital.
Excuse me.
And Nick, please.
Nick Lerry, Employee Relations Manager from Human Resources.
Thank you. And I've got a Suzanne Salter.
Yeah, Suzanne Salter.
I'm sorry, I couldn't pick up anything that has just been said. Suzanne, could you try again, please?
Yeah, Suzanne Salter, Pay and Reward Lead HR.
Thank you very much. And Nigel, you here for the meeting?
No, I'll be ducking out now. Sorry. Okay, goodbye.
Right, now everyone knows each other. Thank you very much. Can we just go to apologies for absence, please, Sophie? Who have we got?
So we have apologies from Councillors Mark Hawthorne and Nigel Moore, and Councillors Tim Harman and Patrick Molyneux are present as substitutes. Councillor Leslie Williams hasn't joined the meeting yet, but I'm assured that she is on her way, so hopefully she won't be too long.
Okay, thanks very much. Now we go to the minutes of the last meeting. I think there's very few people here in this meeting who could verify those minutes, but I understand that Kathy's one of them and Paul is probably the other. So if I could just, were you not at the last meeting, Paul?
No, it was Ian Doby.
It was Ian. So Kathy,
Chair, Chair, I can confirm that they are a true record. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Sophie. Right, now we go to any public questions.
No public questions received.
And any members' questions?
No members' questions received.
Okay, thank you. So we now move on to item number 6, which is the pay policy statement. And I'd ask Mandy Quayle and or Nick Lerry to introduce this for us, please.
I'm going to hand straight off to Nick. He's done the work on it.
Thank you. Go ahead, please, Nick.
Okay, thanks. It's a relatively light touch to this year's pay policy statement, so the large majority of it remains as last year. Perhaps if I could just direct attention to those areas that have changed since last year's statement. There's been a slight update to the list of posts in which the post holder receives a salary of 100,000 or more full-time equivalent. The change is primarily the inclusion of the Director of Finance, whose incremental progression during the last year has increased his salary to over 100,000. And also to the merger of the Director of Public Health role with the Director of Adult Social Care. So those are the two substantive changes since last year. We've made some slight changes to the definition of market rate supplement within the policy, just to make clear that when we are looking at responding to difficulties within the labour market, that can include scenarios where there is a scarcity of a particular type of a candidate, An example of that, for from the last year's recruitment, would be our efforts to recruit to the head of the pension fund. Very small number of people in the labour market who've got the requisite knowledge, skills and experience. When we talk about market rate supplements, generally we're usually talking about a situation in which the council simply pays below the going rate, and therefore, in order to be competitive with other employers in the market, we may need to apply supplements. So it's just adding that element of scarcity to the going rate issues in relation to labour market. Thirdly, we've included for the first time a separate section on travel and vehicle provision. This is primarily for two reasons. We've successfully introduced during last year a car leasing scheme for low emission vehicles, which is now up and running and will hopefully be a useful support to recruitment to hard to fill posts. And we've also got clarification on the vehicle provision arrangements for more senior staff in the fire service who are required to have available vehicles that are suitable for emergency response. So we thought it was appropriate to reference those specifically in the pay policy statement this year. So they're in a separate section. I've made reference to the position regarding the government's approach to restriction of public sector severance payments. Those who have been involved with this committee and pay policy statement over the years will know that this has been sort of on and off since 2015. Regulations were finally introduced in November to place restrictions on severance payments to staff leaving public sector organisations, placing a cap of 95,000 on the total value of a severance package, which rather controversially included the value of the pension strain cost for employees in relation to the exit. The MHCLG also proposed some further reforms to local government severance payments to follow on the back of the national exit pay cap. The regulations were subject to a range of judicial review challenges, following which the government undertook what was described as a comprehensive review of the effects of the exit pay cap and concluded that there were some unintended consequences of the legislation as it was drafted, and they have now withdrawn the regulations. Fortunately, we don't have anybody in Gloucestershire whose pay had to be severance pay had to be capped in that way. So such people now have to have all of that unpicked so that they can get the correct pension severance payments. So that doesn't apply to us, unfortunately. The Treasury have indicated that we'll now be working at pace to introduce alternative legislation to restrict excessive public sector severance payments. So that's anticipated during the course of the year. So by the time we get round to looking at the pay policy statement this time next year, it's likely that there will be severance pay legislation introduced that will be applicable to the council. So it's just making a note of that to indicate it is likely to be introduced during the year, and that will be reflected in next year's pay policy statement. We've also made a few incidental changes to the wording to improve clarity and formatting, but those are not substantive issues. So I think in a nutshell, that's really what's changed since last year's pay policy statement. So if anybody's got any queries on any of those points.
Okay, Nick, first of all, thanks very much for that presentation. I've got Paul, but first of all, I'd just like to say I'm really pleased to see the inclusion of the car leasing scheme. That was a scheme that I brought to the council about 18 months, 2 years ago. And I know Mandy's been working to get that through and get it all agreed and everything lined up. So that will hopefully support some of our young social workers starting out in their careers who use their own vehicles and enable them to access. So that's a really good thing. But I'll move on now to Paul, who's indicated he's got a question. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much. It's just a question I've got around the specifics around it. It says this includes reference to the provision of fuel for GFRS principal officers, etc., in that paragraph. The changes that are being suggested, would this minimise the risk of potential fraud, as we saw in the case of the previous chief fire officer a couple of years ago? Would this minimise that, the change?
I think Mandy.
Shall I come? Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yeah. I mean, I was really strongly involved with this, and it will, if only because for the first time it requires recording of all mileage and sign off every month by the manager in terms of the volume of mileage. And we've taken professional advice from PS Tax and others who are the sort of accepted specialists in this area to ensure that the scheme is fully compliant with. There's very particular HMRC rules around emergency use of vehicles by senior officers to respond to those situations. So yeah, the short answer is yeah, I believe it will.
And Paul, you happy with that? You got any further questions? Leslie, you've posted something in the chat, which obviously members of the public can't see. Is there something you wanted to raise around mileage?
Well, only that I know that following on from the events to do with GFRS, the business of mileage cropped up and also other expenses. And I just wondered how they were dealt with in all this. Does it have any relevance? But if people are submitting claims, it would be part of a similar arrangement.
Yeah, so this particular policy, and there's a couple of levels of it, is specifically to do with the provision of vehicles and associated expenses with travel. But generally, as a side issue, we've also, as part of this sort of defining the rotoring scheme and when people are working and how they're on rotas, and adding a whole raft of HR policies and practice that just weren't there before.
I'm happy with that.
Okay, is there any other councillor who have any further questions on item number 6? So I can't see anyone indicating. So we're being asked to approve the changes. So are we all happy that the changes go through and are approved? Please show hands. Yep, that's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to item number 7, local government schemes directions policy. And again, if I could ask Nick or Mandy to step in and now brief us, please.
Yeah, Mandy, I think it may be happy for me just to lead straight into that one. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, that's fine. This one's very techy.
Yes, apologies for that as well. It's one of those areas that's been a bit difficult to translate entirely into plain English. I shall do. It's not quite as gobbledygooky as it may appear. Essentially, there have been just to start off with. Sorry. So each local authority is required. Each LGPS scheme employer is required to produce and publish a statement on its use of the employer discretions that are available under the LGPS regulations. This was a statutory requirement introduced at the time that the new pension schemes were introduced. So when there was the switch from the old final salary schemes to the new career average arrangements. So we've duly put into place a discretions policy statement for Gloucestershire County Council, which was approved by this committee in July 2014. During the course of the last, I suppose, 18 months or so, there have been various decisions made by the Pensions Ombudsman in which comments have been made about the use of discretions under the public sector pension schemes and the way in which policies on those discretions are expressed. To cut a long story short, the gist of it is that it's important that employers do not couch their policies in a way that could be seen as fettering. So wording your policy or a policy in a way that you will always do X or you will never do Y, that can be seen as a fetter on discretion and therefore could lead to that particular element of the policy being challenged as unlawful. So that's the primary reason for us making some suggested changes to the wording of the various elements of the policy to ensure we're not unduly fettering discretion in that way. The second element is that it's generally considered helpful to include at least some indication within the policy in specific areas as to the type of circumstance in which the discretion might be exercised positively in relation to an employee. So again, we've looked to do that in the suggested changes to the Council's discretions policy statement. That's been done in a fairly pro forma way, in the way in which we thread slightly there. So I've made a number of changes to the suggested wording, primarily to indicate that cases will be the matters will be considered on the basis of a business case, and that discretion will be exercised where it was considered in the Council's best interests to do so, and applying an example to that, which could be where an employee might otherwise unjustly suffer a detriment as a result of error on the part of the employer. We'd certainly want to, and it's always been our intention that we would not want to have a situation where we couldn't, because of our policy, remedy a situation where an employee would suffer as a result of a mistake that the Council has made, which arguably could be the case given the way the policy provisions are currently worded. Sorry if that sounds a bit rambling. I hope I've managed to convey the gist of it. But please do let me know if you'd like me to explain that further.
No, Nick, I read through the document and I do understand the summary that you've given it. If I could go and ask other councillors, is there any questions that they've got for Nick? I can see Paul Hodgkinson's indicated. Paul, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted just to clarify something. Really, sorry, there's a lot of feedback coming through there.
Nick, could you just pop yourself on mute whilst Paul's asked this question, please?
Yeah.
Yeah, great, thank you. It was just a point of clarification. I'm not quite sure whether you answered that, you said this or not. So I'll just, it was really just, I wanted to understand if there's been a specific case that has kind of impacted a Gloucestershire member of the pension scheme arrangement, which has kind of led to the change in the discretionary policy. In other words, has there been a legal challenge which has led to this? Or has there been a particular set of circumstances around an individual or a set of individuals which has led to this change? Thank you.
No, we've not had any specific case, I'm pleased to say. It's merely us responding in policy sense to the general drift of advice from the Local Government Association following the various ombudsman's cases. So no specific case here in Gloucestershire.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Nick. Paul, any further questions or observations? No? Any other councillor wish to ask Nick or Mandy anything on item number 7? No, I can see no one else indicating. So it just goes for us to approve the recommended revision of wording on the Local Government Pension Scheme discretions policy as outlined pages 21 to 36 and outlined by Nick. So can I have a show of hands to all those who approve the change of wording? That is unanimous. So that is carried, as it were. That completes the meeting today, and I'd just like to thank everyone for turning up and taking part, and also any members of the public who viewed us. I hope that you managed to grasp what we were talking about. Sophie, is there any other issues that you need us to cover before we close the meeting?
No, that's everything, Chair. Thank you.
With that then, thank you very much. Good morning.